Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the tent. The background noise is rain, refreshing us and reminding us, I suppose, of the broader context and our connections to the environment, and that even here we're not immune. But the focus today is technology changing free speech. And I think by technology we mean technology in the broader sense of the word, although I think we'll spend a lot of time talking about ICT, information communication technologies. Freedom of speech needs no introduction, but we will look at freedom of speech, freedom of expression within the broader range of human rights. The two main speakers, Salil, Tripathi and Sarah, will both give different accounts. Salil will give more of a sweep historically, and Sarah will contextualize what we're saying in the context of Egypt and recent experiences there. This is very much an interactive session. There are a lot of you, so we don't have time to do introductions all the way around, but when you make an intervention, please introduce yourself at that point. And come in at any moment, right? Just wave a hand and I'll bring you in. Now, it's probably worth saying as an introduction that there is a huge upside in the correlation between freedom of expression, freedom of speech and technology. Hillary Clinton, the Secretary of State from the USA in December in The Hague, talked about freedom of expression, talked about technology as an enabler to all human rights. And Carl Bildt, the Swedish foreign minister, has also been on record saying something very similar. And it's true. If you look at the role of mobile telephones in Africa and many parts of Asia, Latin America, there has been a leapfrog in technology, and clearly it has enabled people to connect to the internet and possibly enjoy services that enable them to have better access to education, to housing, to healthcare, particularly in rural communities. Similarly with the Arab Spring, but also uprisings in Iran, in Syria, in Bahrain, everywhere, tweeting, Facebook, and other technologies have had a positive effect. They've enabled people, activists, to get their voice out to the wider world. So I don't want anybody to think that somehow the context of this discussion is a negative one or necessarily a limiting one. There's a huge upside, and actually a lot of ICT companies have been very good at communicating the upside. The challenge comes, of course, with the downside of that relationship, the 5%, if you like, where these technologies can be used against freedom of expression and against human rights. And there has been a lack of discussion around that 5%. We're only just beginning to have that discussion. The events in Egypt over a year ago, but also now in Syria, in Bahrain, in Belarus, and other places are beginning that discussion. But perhaps we've been talking past each other. I have a sense that the technology people, when the human rights people want to talk about human rights and technology, feel that the human rights people are just there to constrain, to control, to take away the freedom of the internet and the entrepreneurial spirit of the industry. And then the human rights people, they don't trust. They don't trust the technology people. They listen to the technology people talking about big data as an inevitability, and they see the technology people as technicians who are naive of how their technologies will be used by politicians and other vested interests. So we were talking about trust this morning, and there is this trust gap, I would say, between the technologists and the human rights activists. And to a large extent, we've not been speaking the same language. Now, my name's John Morrison. I work for the Institute for Human Rights and Business, and we spend a lot of time trying to bridge that gap. But I think it's a big gap, and maybe this gap will become more evident as we talk. So I want to start with Sarah. A couple of thoughts. And if we think about the uprising in Egypt, how did technology help and affect the uprising in Egypt? How big a part of it was it?
I think that the uprising in Egypt that happened in 25 January 2011 was the first real freedom of expression exercise Egyptians witnessed in their history in a very long time. And in the internet era that we're living, autocrat governments usually tend to come up with extremely creative ideas to limit people's access to internet and to mobile networks. What happened in Egypt, the uprising was actually a result of both having technology being available and taking away technology. Technology was available in the beginning. People used it. They advocated for the cause of getting out in the streets, fighting Mubarak regime, and posting pictures on Facebook and YouTube, videos on YouTube and pictures on Twitter. And that was the way people in the street were showing those who were still in their homes, who were not interested yet, who were not engaged yet, to see that there is actually something happening out in the street and there is something, semi-revolution is happening. So that was encouraging to the people. When technology was taken back from us on the 28th of January, some people know that mobile phones were cut off Egypt completely that day. But what most of people don't know is that internet access as well was cut for a whole week. And that was what really frustrated the people, because in Egypt, we lacked freedom of expression during the Mubarak regime, but internet was the only tool for us as activists and bloggers to express our own opinions, to express our frustration from the government. So internet was our only tool, and then when they cut it off as well, this caused more frustration, and this what led people to get out in the streets and actually be out there and, okay, we're not going to express ourselves online on internet, but we're going to express it on the streets. And surprisingly, when internet was back, people kept the communication moving. Traditional media, TV and radio channels used social media as a source of information to their content. That was because people trusted those who were writing and tweeting and who are active on the social media network. They had a very big trust in them, so they used them as resource people in their own TV programs and their own radio channels. And this helped a lot of people to see that maybe it's about time to regain trust in technology, but from a different perspective, which is trusting those who use technology and then trust their medium of media, whatever it is, either it's social media or TV or radio. One of the reasons why technology in Egypt has been one of the main reasons that the uprising happened is also because in Egypt we still lack internet infrastructure. It's not that strong, and not a lot of people have access to internet. During the revolution, some people tried to use dial-up, and using dial-up numbers from other countries. A lot of people outside Egypt supported us with providing internet dial-up numbers that we can use and access internet through. And I think that was, and also people started using landlines because mobile phones were cut off. That was also one of the times that Egyptians started to realize it's not about using technology, new technology, and leaving old technology. It's about what's good and what's bad, what we can use right now and what is not suitable for our current situation. Okay, we cannot use mobile phones, but we have alternative, which is landlines. So I think definitely technology and social networking was one of the main reasons why the uprising in Egypt happened.
So moving forward, what are the lessons for technologists from what happened in Egypt? What do you expect from companies and scientists and technology guys? You know, should they be engaging in these social issues now? How does it work?
Due to the cut of internet service and mobile phones, a lot of people had a huge mistrust in the telecommunication companies in general, and human rights activists filed complaints against those companies. Those companies worked extremely hard after they brought back their services to regain trust in people. We used to get in Egypt every one day, every 2 days, messages from those telecommunication companies saying, we promise not to cut internet connection again, we promise to provide the best service. This certain telecommunication company is now available in North Sinai, it's now available everywhere, they're expanding. But yet they still they were not able to promote themselves as they used to do before. Like they limited their sponsorship for certain events. They limited their billboard ads. They limited a lot of their TV ads because they knew they had to work so much hard to regain people's trust again, to be able to market themselves again and to be there on the ground. Maybe the social media is a good example of how scientists and technology people should think, because during the revolution, people did not have trust in social media as much as they trusted those who were tweeting and those who were active on YouTube, for example. So if I know this person and I trust him and I see him writing something on Twitter, then I know it's true. If he uploads a video on YouTube, I know it's correct, it's not fabricated because I trust this person. So maybe companies should try to personalize their services in a way, or try to use personal icons that they can engage with the people more and to have more trust in the system and the company.
Thank you, Sarah. Salil, this assumption that technology is great for free speech, can you give some sort of historical context to this? Is it correct, the assumption that generally technology is a good thing for freedom of expression?
Thanks, John. My name is Salil Tripathi, and I work at the Institute for Human Rights and Business, but I have a great interest and passion for free speech issues. So thanks for the question. I think if we look closely at it, it might at first glance seem that technology is a great enabler, as Hillary Clinton put it that day in the Netherlands. But technology often is value neutral, and its impact can work both ways. And if we really look at the history of the past 1,000 years, even as far as back as that, that's what we will find, that if someone wants to speak, somebody else wants that person to be silenced. I'll begin with a short, very short description of a novel from 1990 by the Indian-born author Salman Rushdie. And he wrote this novel called Haroun and the Sea of Stories, which is basically a novel entirely fictional, but very much drawn by the experience he was undergoing when he was under the fatwa at that time over another novel that he had written called The Satanic Verses. And that novel is about two lands, two different countries, or two different provinces. One called the land of Gup and one called the land of Chup. Gup in Hindi means to speak and talk, and Chup means silence. And the two are at constant battle with one another. Gup is full of light, lies are told, jokes are told, songs are sung, histories are shared, and so on. And in Chup, it's like a dictatorship, and you can't say anything, and it's always dark. And the Chup side is winning at the beginning, and in the end, of course, the Gup side wins. So my point is that this whole battle between the speech and silence that we know of is something that has gone on for too long. Go back to the earliest things that were printed, and very often things were being burnt at that time. Presses have been attacked, presses have been locked, presses have been sued against when Gutenberg invented the first technology, which was printing that we think of. If you think of broadcast media, radio stations have lost their licenses. Radio stations have also been physically attacked when they've got it wrong. If one looks at just the printed book that came out, James Joyce couldn't distribute Ulysses in Europe, in at least the UK and the US when it was published. It took a woman, a very brave woman called Sylvia Beach in France, in Paris to publish it. Savonarola, the Dominican monk, he was burnt alive. Heinrich Heine predicted the rise of, in a sense, the rise of Nazism in 1870s in his play Al-Mansur, when he said that first they burn books and then they burn people. And he was talking about Germany at a particular time. Pramodya Anantatur, an Indonesian writer, was sent away to an island for 14 years because he was writing books that Suharto's government thought was being supportive of the communists. Liu Xiaobo, the Chinese writer, again, what did he want to do? He wanted to rewrite the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in Chinese, and he's in jail. He won the Nobel Prize a couple of years ago. Václav Havel in the Czech Republic. And I can go on and on and on by examples like this of people who have tried to speak out the truth, their version of the truth, sometimes the eternal truth, and someone wants it suppressed. Newspapers are sued, and I used to be a journalist before, and one of the things we always knew was that news is what someone somewhere suppresses, the rest is advertising. And that's something also worth bearing in mind. That and then we turn to internet. And it's a great enabler. Of course, people were able to tweet. People were able to use the Facebook to come together. People were able to use Google to send out messages, to Gmail services to send out messages. But just as we talk about Twitter, you have to think of the big data and the impact that we've been hearing about yesterday from the gentleman from SAS, who said that he can find out the implications of what an economy is going to be like by monitoring the conversations of people 5 months earlier. Now that's scary, because in whose hands does it go and how is it used? Similar with Facebook insisting on real names, huge implications for people who want to express their views on something. And just as Google enables ones to find everything, there are other tools where companies can actually enable the state to go after specific individuals and identify with almost 100% precision. So just as technology empowers people, it also empowers dictators. And I think that's something we need to bear in mind. And therefore, this drama between Gup and Chup may have ended in a novel, Harun and the Sea of Stereo, but in the real world, it's still going on. We must keep fighting.
But isn't too much freedom of speech a bad thing on the internet? I mean, if people just write any kind of rubbish, isn't one of our problems... No, but isn't one of our problems now we're moving away from print media to the internet, is the lack of editorial quality control? I mean, good editing is a type of censorship, isn't it? And we require that to sift through what's worth reading and what isn't. And if the internet is just full of rubbish, then the quality will disappear within that.
Right. So two questions here. One is the internet is full of rubbish. Part of it is, part of it isn't. We don't know which is which. And sometimes we find it out on our own, and sometimes we find it out by trusting an intermediary, such as a team of editors. There's no, one individual never does the job. I mean, we all know that. And which is how newspapers came about. And therefore, we learned to separate rumors from facts. A simple example, when I was a reporter in the past, I was covering a riot in India. And I saw 3 people killed. And at the city morgue, I saw 3 more people killed. And I wrote to my editors that 6 people had died. Others were talking about 20, 30, and 40. So my editors called me back. They were in Delhi, I was in Bombay, and they said, what's the truth? I said, well, I saw 6. And we ran the story with 6. In the end, the figure was about 13. But I'm much happier that we wrote what we knew to be true, rather than say, but other people are saying it's 40. The implication of that is irresponsibility and retaliatory violence. So that's one thing that can happen. And the other thing about if it is something that's full of rubbish, don't read it. I mean, that's what Rushdie used to tell people, that, you know, if you don't like my book, don't read it or argue with it. And that's one of the biggest challenges now, that why is it that people who are upset with even evil propaganda about something, the other side should speak up and should challenge.
Right, but I still don't think I mean, this issue that technology and freedom of expression, when combined, don't necessarily create a better whole. Because too much information on the internet that's unmediated and is of poor quality satisfies freedom of expression and freedom of speech, but doesn't necessarily inform people, does it? I
think what happens is, yes, you're right that there is a danger that there is too much information, and there's a danger that a lot of it is quite useless. But I think which is one reason why newspapers come about, which is one reason there are radio stations.
But no one's buying the newspapers anymore. No one's listening to the radio
But you can do that on the blog. Right, I mean, there are blogs which are news aggregators. There's a service called ProPublica in the United States, supported by foundations, run by excellent newspaper editors from the past, who collect information and write very good investigative reports. And we'll have to start buying newspapers again, in some form.
If anybody wants to come in, please indicate. We've got a few, we've got 3 or 4. Pim, I want to give to you at some point as well. Do you want to come in now?
No, I think you should take someone from the floor.
We'll take 3 or 4, and then we'll... Okay, so we could pass the microphone and we'll take... these 4. Please introduce yourself when you speak.
Okay, I'm Margaret. I'm Margaret. I'm Dutch, and my fields are philosophy and law. I was just thinking that the problem is not just bad quality, also some things that are private. And I was thinking of the example of somebody who was a homosexual and who had an affair. And normally, if his housemate would have seen it, it might have caused some shame. But he put it on the internet, and this person committed suicide. And So it is Facebook, and it is the fact that we are giving away a lot of our data, but also it is giving people an opportunity to share very personal things. And connected to that is, I think, a responsibility of the media. We were discussing earlier this morning that people don't want to become politicians anymore. I think the way that politicians are being portrayed in the media makes that only narcissists become politicians. And other people will find something else, another way to do good for society. To become a politician, you have to be a narcissist, otherwise you're not going to survive. And I think the media are not taking any responsibility for that.
Thank you for that. And I mean, it reminds me of a session we were in yesterday when the presenter said that privacy, the right to privacy, which we often see as a balancing right, is only something that's 200 or 300 years old. That you go back 300, 400 years in the village, no one had any privacy. Neighbors knew exactly what each other were doing. And then there was this assumption somehow that we need to get used to a future where we all have less privacy again. That with the internet and these technologies, we need to be used to diminished privacy. And there's few people in the room were very uncomfortable with that. So I'd like to know, as we go round, do you value privacy? Is privacy just something that's 200 or 300 years old and that we've got to get used to not having so much? Or did you want to come in on the privacy issue specifically? And then we'll come back to you, yeah.
Hey, thank you. I'm Niklas Gustafsson from Sweden, Stockholm.
Closer to your mouth.
Sorry, I'm Niklas Gustafsson from Sweden. We actually had the same discussion at my table yesterday, and we came to the conclusion about, well, 200 or 300 years ago, we didn't have the privacy that we have today, but you lived in a society with 50 to 100 individuals. I think the problem today is that you share your privacy with a large, you share your information to a lot of huge corporations, and you share your privacy to governments. That you didn't do 200 or 300 years ago as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Right. Let's move on. Yes. Please introduce yourself.
Suhair Muhyiddin from Jordan.
Nice and loud. Yeah.
I'm Suhair Muhyiddin from Jordan, and my background is in communication and media. I just want to comment on the idea of having too much information on the web, and I think, at least for our part of the world in the Arab region, I think we don't have objective media. So here comes the importance of alternative sources of media, and the web and the social media is offering us a variety of sources, and which helps us compare and choose. And I think it's important in these times that we be able also to make our own judgment, especially with all the debates going about, for example, the videos that are coming out from the Syrian revolution, and the credibility of these videos, and the importance here of the information and the information sources that is becoming crucial, because we're talking about a civil war in Syria, and that is sectarian in somehow. So here the information and the sources and the credibility of the information is very important. And in the absence of an objective media in the Arab world, the web is helping in somehow, and having different sources. For example, on Facebook, you can have like 200 people in your circle, and they are posting 200 articles from different sources. And here you can see and compare and choose what you need. And what is important also with the new media is that I think it's ending, or maybe it's not ending, but it has changed the whole scene of the culture of experts. Because the media was most of the time, I mean, at least everywhere, not only in the Arab world, you always receive or host experts to talk about an issue, a certain issue. So the expert knows, and your source is the expert and the opinion of the expert. And now with the new media, it's everybody's voice. And even in like big media outlets, like for example the BBC, I watch the BBC in Arabic, and you can see to which extent the social media has been integrated, and it's becoming more and more important, and then the voice of the people is taking more place. So I think it's the new media is playing a very crucial role in this part of the world. But of course there are some disadvantages where it becomes about ethical issues, to which extent you're using this information to the good cause.
Thank you very much. There are a couple more. Do you want to come in now?
Well, while we stay on the topic, we're going to move on. There's questions all over the place. But to you, Sarah, and others who have experience from the Middle Eastern context now, and also what you just were saying, social media was a massive enabler during the uprising. And now we're seeing how things are slipping back to a certain extent as they were before. And what is the clout of social media now? I'm thinking in relation to more established forms of media, big media houses, the traditional press, where you have an old infrastructure to produce information, do investigative research for your information. Does Egypt stand weak because that sector isn't strong? And what is social media doing today when things are not going as we hoped? You could respond, Sarah, or someone else, and then we move on to the next question. And guys, keep the microphone by your chin, really. Rest it on your chin.
Yeah, really close, like you're cleaning your teeth.
Okay, so yes, in Egypt, unfortunately, we are having a very big drawback in politics and democracy nowadays, and it's very disappointing. And believe it or not, social media is getting a lot of the blame that this is happening, because social media was the way that people saw the disagreement that is there between different parties and the disagreement between different sectors in Egypt. A lot of newspapers went bankrupt because their core was based on investigative reporting. People don't have any time to read newspapers anymore, or even to read blogs. Now the future is in microblogging, now the future is in videos, now the future is in small medium of communication. And this is why I believe that this is about time to regain trust again in the content, the writers, the editors, whoever has a lot of trust from the people is the one who is winning a lot of supporters and trust, and who has not been involved in the new media is actually in a way being completely excluded. We still have, of course, we have newspapers in Egypt that are still there and they're still writing, but in Egypt we have very high rate of illiteracy, so newspapers are not that widespread. TV and radio are higher in terms of exposure and viewership. So this is why the TV and radio channels, as you were saying, they are taking those who were active on social media and making them their guests and their experts, because they are the ones who already have good relations with people on the social network, and then they have also a good feel of what's happening on the ground.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Let's go here. Please introduce yourself.
Yes. Hello everyone, my name is Elina Kiiski and I work for the Finnish Innovation Fund, and I've been involved with this figuring out what does it mean, what new democracy means, and what role social media is playing there. And I think we are somehow in the middle of a revolution which is as big as like writing, or revolution of Gothenburg, revolution of railways, revolution of telephone, and all this has always changed fundamentally how our societies works. As we heard also in the presentation yesterday about how mobile technology is changing the structure of cities. So I think, it is there and it's happening. But then again, I don't think journalism itself is dying. Maybe the big media corporations are dying. Maybe the infrastructure there is dying. But I think, we've been for hundreds of thousands of years, people have been listening to stories of themselves, of what's happening around them to interpret word. And I don't think this storytelling is going anywhere. And these experts of the social media who you were speaking about are maybe the new storytellers of our times. And journalists now have to also, again, become journalists who are writing their story, selling their story, finding their audience, maybe without the big media companies. But I think journalism itself is not dying away. So I think from yes or no conversation, we should be trying to see like how is this new world of media functioning? What does it do for a political agenda? Because it is truly changing our political agendas. And what you were saying about experts, it's changing completely our view on who are the experts who hold the power. Because previously only few had the access to information. Now everybody has it. So it is fundamentally changing our societies, I think.
So you think this technology can deliver quality of expression?
I think it will. I mean, as I said, like human society always finds its way.
Okay.
I think it will again, even if, but we are in the middle of the change now. So that's why I guess it's quite blurry what's going on.
Okay, let's pass this on. We'll go around this way. I'm more cynical. I mean, I think the internet seems to be driven almost purely by market forces at the moment. And I wonder if there really is a business case for quality information. There's a business case for mass communication, mass information, but is there really the business case for quality information on the internet? I don't know. It's a question to all of you to think about. Sir, please introduce yourself.
Well, I'm Doug Carmichael, and I'm
really close, sort of email.
I'm from the Institute for New Economic Thinking, which is George Soros's new think tank. And I want to approach this from a different side, and that is as an individual living in the United States, using the internet for all the ways that we do to learn about what's going on. But in terms of self-expression, what I write on the internet, I have already become much more cautious because I am completely convinced that the surveillance of private communications is very high. And in times of relative peace, it doesn't look like that has a cost. But if the social situation gets more tense, then what you did in a more innocent time looks less innocent. And that's affecting me, and it's affecting all the people that I know very directly right now.
Are you on Facebook, sir?
Yes, and I've stopped using my Facebook account. I was at a conference in New York called Freedom to Connect. It was in Washington, actually, with internet people talking about the security issues. And the amount of surveillance that's actually going on is much, much higher than I had any idea of.
Thank you for that. Sir, let's keep it going.
Thank you. I have 3 submissions to make. My name is Daniel Sikaza, I'm a journalist from Zambia. First of all, I'd like to say that information communication technologies are very good. I've heard many negative stories about the fact that information communication technologies are having a very negative impact on free speech. On the contrary, I must say that the world today does not even have enough communication technologies because technology still costs money. Therefore, not everyone has had the opportunity to be able to communicate. We haven't heard all the voices that we ought to hear at this particular time. I do believe that human beings must come to a point where we've heard all the voices that ought to be heard at this particular time. I say this because technology at the moment still is in a situation where the alternatives are very few. If we look at the example of Egypt, for example, if the government was able to interfere with Facebook and other communication technologies, that means therefore that we still have a very big challenge. Therefore, it's important that we should have more technologies around us. Second point I'd like to make is also that when we talk about information communication technologies being the cause of, let's say, the lack of privacy, I think that we're missing the point in the sense that there are many natural ways in which we can probably keep our privacy if we want to. A simple example basically be that if you are afraid that much of your privacy will be exposed, just don't go on Facebook. Do the natural things. Avoid doing certain things that you ought to do. The point I'm trying to make here is that information communication technologies in the case of Egypt were not really the cause of the uprising, neither were they the solution. The solution lies deeply in the human condition. So there were certain factors that were not in place that led to the uprising in Egypt. You're talking about probably governance, you're talking about the social distance, you're talking about economic situations, you're talking about unemployment. The point I'm making here is that we still need information communication technologies to be more available. Third point, I think, is something that we discussed in our group yesterday. We are a generation that is so afraid of the impact of communication technologies because we kind of live in an information age or in an age where there's lots of enlightenment and awareness. So we should keep an open mind to information communication technologies. And I also agree with what she said about the fact that when it comes to the quality of information that is available, let's say on the internet, we should say that journalism remains a vehicle for delivering quality information. And many people have talked about the fact that journalism is on its way out, is going to die because people have lots of exposure to information. The difference between journalism and the use of communication means using ICTs is that journalism still has a very important quality, that of verification, which you don't find among bloggers, among people using information communication technology. So journalism, in my view, is going to emerge stronger in this in a generation of information communication technologies. So it's a great world. We need to embrace communication technologies. We need more and not less.
It's very interesting that. So you think users will pay for verification? They'll pay money to have information verified by journalists?
Sorry, I didn't get the question. You say
so the marketplace on the internet will support what you're saying, verification.
That's right. And that is what will distinguish journalism from the rest of information communication technologies, because I hear people saying that journalism is dying and being swallowed in the greater world of communication. That's not the truth. That's a fallacy, actually.
Thank you for making that point. Lots of people wanting to come in. If there's another microphone this side, is there another one? So quick responses to that point. We'll do the two, if you want to respond to a particular point, we'll do the two-hand rule. You can do this. This means I want to come in now because I want to respond to that point just made. So this is one of these, is it?
Yeah. Sure. I just want to continue with what he highlighted. And I just want to highlight the fact that we, as society, we need to really accept the fact that there is a shift from industrial age towards the information age. However, what's not happening is that there is no shift for society towards that era. And what I mean by this, the roles that there's a need for new roles that need to be created within the information age. The manner in which we teach journalists, the manner in which we teach computer scientists needs to change. In fact, we probably need to create roles that combine these two roles.
Right.
And we need people that play in the information age that can structure the information engines in such a manner that they are suitable for society going forward. I mean, if you look at Wikipedia, the manner in which it is structured, it's probably because the leader understands both worlds. And the same is not true for Facebook or other tools, for instance. So I think going forward, we need to forget the silo mentality. I think this has been said a lot before, and create new roles of people who can be able to manage these things far more better.
That's really interesting. I mean, but Wikipedia is not for profit, right? So it's not a business model per se, is it? If Wikipedia is an example of these two silos coming together, is it a model that others will follow?
I think it offers many lessons for us that we can, I mean, the governance processes that are embedded within Wikipedia enable Wikipedia to be of quality, right? However, I'm not saying that it needs to be, it justifies commercialization within this process. I'm just saying the manner in which it's structured in such a way that you don't necessarily need a regulator sitting somewhere to regulate the process, but it happens anyway.
Self-regulating, yes. Okay, so we've got two hands. Well, you actually have three hands because you had one hand up before, so now you've got three hands, and then we'll go there, and then we'll go back to the round the room,
I'll try and be quick, because I know
nice and close to your mouth.
Okay, I know I've talked before. I really wanted to respond to your suggestion that we can choose not to opt in to technology, and I think that is fundamentally untrue. And even though I'm actually not always too worried about that, because I'm quite positive about technological development, I think this is something that we need to be clear about. One thing, very silly example, is living in Oxford. If I had not been on Facebook, I would have had no social life. In Oxford, social life is being regulated by Oxford, by Facebook, it really is. More fundamental example, we talked yesterday about the possibility of having a certain technology inserted in your car. And this technology would transmit your data to an insurance company. And then you can prove, I am a very safe driver. And so if you opt into this, if you say, yes, my data will be transmitted, then you can prove that you are a very safe driver and you will have a lower cost of insurance. But what does this mean? This means that if you choose not to do that, if you choose not to have your data sent to the insurance company, you will be suspect. Because everybody who is actually a safe driver, they have an incentive to have this data sent. People who are very dangerous drivers, they have an incentive to keep this private. But if you want to keep it private just because you think your insurer has no business with what you do during your day, then you are suspect that you are a dangerous driver, and you will pay for this. Because you will get the special insurance that is for people who do not give them any information. And the insurance company has no option, because this is a group in which there will be relatively a lot of dangerous drivers. The insurance company has no option then to make that group pay. And this is a normal way in which it will work. And we are going to have to pay for being private.
Are you a good driver or a dangerous driver then?
Sorry?
Are you a good driver or a dangerous driver?
I'm a very good driver.
That's good.
Really.
So there's no self-interest in your question. Right, we're going to take this and then I'm going to go back to the sweeper. And
Hi,
yes.
my name is Chris Gordon. I'm from Ireland, and I just love how conferences have changed over the last number of years, where engagement is measured by how many people are looking down at their phones, which is a fantastic change. I was actually an experience yesterday in one of the llberg forum groups, and it was a discussion. It was a good discussion, a heated discussion, all the rest of it. I ended up actually getting chopped off before I finished my phrase, which was fine. But then I was thinking, I still have this question that I never got to ask. How will I get it asked? And I tweeted it. And there were 4 other people in the room who picked up on it. And they answered my question. Now, the interesting thing about that was there was 30 people in the room that didn't get the answer that I got. They didn't even get the question. But it was fascinating that I got my answer anyway. But how everybody who wasn't on Twitter at that stage was excluded from that little conversation. Yeah. My point was just about relating to the relevance of media and how it sustains itself and all the rest of it. Obviously in Ireland we're quite small. We've got regional papers but do international news. So they obviously feed back off what's AP feeds and Reuters feeds and Thomson and all the rest of it. But what they've decided to change was, instead of trying to catch catching news, which they can't anymore. They can't be on the ground 2 minutes after an incident occurred to take a photograph to verify. What they're doing now is focusing on truth and accuracy, I suppose. And that's how it is that they're studying relevant, I suppose. That was just my point from earlier.
Thank you. Now, we chopped you there, so we're going to now start going back in order here.
My name is Gunilla Arén, and I'm responsible for management training for women executives. I see a democratic problem, and when I see the 2 young girls that I have close to me, they don't see news, they don't read papers, they get all their information from media, from internet. So when I say, you don't know what's happening in the world, oh yes I do, they say, because they think they do, by looking to their PCs. But in fact, they don't know what happens, and they are too personal. We have discussions about this, but there is a democratic problem here, because how can they be good citizens, how can they be responsible if they do not know what it means being a good citizen? And I think this is an extremely big problem, not only just that everybody express themselves and that we have to find someone that editors it. How can we have societies? How can we be democratic? I think this is an extremely big problem.
Thank you.
I'm inserting a quick question to you there. Because my very quick question to you is, do you think your daughters would be reading the newspaper if they weren't on Facebook?
No. What I say is that I see that they and other young persons, they don't watch TV news, they don't read newspapers, so the way they get information about what happens in society is totally different, but they do think that they get the right information. And every now and again, when I talk about something important that has happened, I can see that they don't know anything. And thereby, I realize probably very many young persons of their age, because they're 16 and 20, almost 21, and they are becoming big persons, and it is important for them
to realize what is important, being a citizen, being democratic, and that the society 10 years ahead will have these kind of citizens, and how can we then have a democracy if only they look very short ahead what happens.
So we have a burning reaction here. You've provoked a few people.
I think your worry is right, but I don't know. I mean, I slightly disagree with the answer, because the thing is, like, what's happening, it's not going to stop. I mean, there is no point really speaking about whether this is going to happen, whether we're going to use social media, what's going to be happening in the internet, because it is happening and it will only get faster. I think it's a challenge of our democratic principles, democratic societies, to solve the problem of citizenship. What does it mean to be a citizen in this world that is functioning this way? The answer is not that we just try to say that we have to keep on reading newspapers. We have to come up with new ways of interpreting the information. We have to come up with new meanings for democracy. We have fundamentals of democracy, but of course the way the democracy is becoming real is changing over time, because the world is changing. So therefore, I think, I would also throw this challenge to media companies. I think they have put a lot of effort in trying to keep up with their power, because they have a lot to lose. But they haven't really used their all innovation potential to be part of this change, to make to look at how they educate, their educative role from the citizens' perspective. So I think the answer has to be progressive and not holding back.
Okay, there was two. You see, this is the trouble. Mediating a session on freedom of speech is really hard. So there is a democracy. So we have two trends. We have a democratic trend, which is the microphone gradually working its way around the room, and then Salil and Sarah can respond. But then we have this other trend, which is this need we have to react to each other. So if it's a two-hander, is it a real two-hander, and keep the two-hander ones really short, really short? So very short. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Rodrigo Garay, social entrepreneur. I would like to add to democracy the issue of accountability. I'm a social entrepreneur, and I know who to make accountable if a newspaper writes something wrong about me. But in the social media, anyone can write anything about me, and I cannot make anyone accountable. And you were saying who want to be a politician. Well, I would say who want to be a social entrepreneur when you don't know your enemy, because you cannot counteract those arguments, and that is limiting actually the free speech.
Very good point, sir.
Okay,
just
can I go next?
Brief, yeah.
Actually, it's about the question whether the newspaper and the TV are, I mean, why do you think that they will make your daughters or anybody good citizens? I'll just give an example from Jordan. Since the Arab Spring started, young people have become, for the first time, interested in the socio-economic problems and the political problems and all these terminologies didn't exist in their world until there was the Arab Spring, and the Arab Spring was, it's the social media. Actually, they became even more active citizens because they felt that they have the opportunity for once to be empowered, and the web and the social media gave them that empowerment that they couldn't have. That was the first time, actually. So I think, on the contrary, the social media and the web empowered these young people to become more effective citizens.
Thank you. Right, we're going to this gentleman here, who will introduce himself first.
Ngolia Kimanzu from the Swedish International Agriculture Initiative. I totally agree in the rapid development of ICT. I have no issue with that. And also don't believe that we can really solve the lack of democracy by control. I think this question is ideological and what kind of models we choose. Because, for instance, you describe about Wikimedia, which is relatively cheap, accessible to a lot of people, but they don't have the resources to invest in technology development. I think it's too market-driven. I think you need a counter to this so that we can have a rapid ICT development that also takes in care of the democratic deficit with the current technologies that we have.
Thank you.
I like the argument about the impact of ICTs on democracy. My submission right now is that we should not be overly worried about the impact of ICTs on democracy. I want to believe that democracy did not exist at the foundation of life. It's a kind of governance system that was invented along the way. And to me, it occurs that democracy is a kind of governance system that may be on its way out, because at the time it was invented and at the time it was at peak, the kind of ICTs that, or shall I say, the kind of technologies that are available were not at the level at which we are. So I see that a new kind of governance system is emerging. I'm not very sure.
But won't that be democracy? If you're talking about a technology that enables all 6 billion people to have a voice, that is the best democracy there is.
Maybe
you mean traditional democracy?
It may not necessarily be called democracy. Right. It's a new form of governance. For example, in democracy, I'm looking at two types of democracy, representative and direct democracy. And I see that representative democracy might be on its way out. So it's some kind of
direct democracy.
Direct democracy or something beyond that. So I think that we need to continue keeping our eyes open to a new kind of governance system that is coming.
Okay, very good. Right, let's get back to the working around the clock. So this gentleman and then that. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Sharan, and I work to support and strengthen human rights defenders. I agree with the sentiment expressed by some of you that journalism will come out of this revolution in technology stronger. And the reason I feel this is because I think there's going to be always a demand for some sort of edited quality news that will rise above the noise of social media, but at the same time not be as narrow as what we have coming from the traditional news sources. And I would like to give an example of that from a Nigerian activist who I met recently who spoke of Sahara Reporters, which is based in the US, run by an exiled Nigerian human rights activist. So what he does is take video streams that are coming from all over Nigeria, and anyone can send it to him in New York. And he is now almost a professionally trained journalist, and he has a small team, and they run a news show, they run news broadcasts, they stream in Nigeria. And yes, it started as a non-profit, but now advertisers have seen the value of this model. And human rights activists in Nigeria tell me that they get some of the best news of what's happening, election fraud, so on there, even though it's coming from New York and all the way back. So I think there are going to be new models that come that are in between the two extremes. And I think those are going to be really more relevant, and I think that's the way forward.
So we can't hear you when you speak without a microphone. Is it a two-hander?
Is someone ready to pay for it?
Yes, that's what I said. Advertisers are picking up to it now because they see how popular it is, and it's working, and it's got quality.
Okay, let's get the microphone to the gentleman there.
I'm lucky to enjoy my freedom of speech now.
Can you introduce yourself?
I'm Yang He. I'm from China. I'm a teacher in the university, specialized in law, in the major of law. And I have a question for Morrison, a specialist in human rights, right? And my question is based on my experience in China. Some of my friends and I sometimes want to type down some words on the online, especially I want to talk with my friends I want to type down some words in it, or want to find some information on internet with the Google search engines, but I cannot type down the words. For example, in the year of 2010, if you want to type the name of the Nobel Prize winner for peace, that's Liu Xiaobo. If you want to type it in the Google service in Chinese characters, it's hard for you to type down. And you just find another counterpart with the same pronunciation, but it's not the same word, same Chinese character. So for me, for such kind of experience, my question is that the right to use my own language on internet is a part of the rest of speech or expression. So what's your logical reasoning for it or argument for it?
So the ability to use your own language on the internet.
Yeah, yes.
But also the way that's controlled.
Controlled by somebody else behind the website.
I mean, just as a matter of information, our website is blocked in China. So if you put www.ihrb.org in mainland China, you won't get our website. It's been blocked for the past year. But I'll let Salil answer that when we get to his response. We'll just take one or two more, and then I'll let Salil and Sarah come back. Pim has a two-hander.
Well, to build on what you were saying, I mean, we were talking about this yesterday. And this is a technology question. It's a question to the people who know these technologies and how they work. I mean, we're seeing a strange combination of bottom-up and top-down. Some actually very top-down created systems through which people on the ground can communicate en masse. But that also means that you can turn off the tap on these systems, a bit more than we think. And if we're talking about technology and free speech, are we moving towards, or what will they look like, the technologies where you cannot turn off the tap? Because the internet is incredible, but it's still surprising how much can be controlled on the internet. I mean, does anyone know where we're heading there? Will we have truly decentralized communication systems which you won't be able to turn off? And when will we have them?
So that's
Does anyone know the answer to that question?
Yeah. We've got about 20 minutes left, and I think this next 20 minutes should be about where we're heading. I think that's really good to start looking forward. I want to take about another 4 or 5 and then give Sarah and Salil a chance to put other ideas into the room.
I'll give it to the gentleman next to me, and then we move on.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and make this point. I don't have this thought right in my head, but I'll try and make it. The United Nations came about at a time when, there was a need for a world entity that would take care of world issues. You couldn't do it at a single country. And this is what the point I was trying to make about us not being ready for the information age, and that there's a gentleman in our group, I'm part of the young leaders within llberg, that is trying to do something in Rwanda, but he's afraid of doing it because of what he thinks could happen as part of that process. So this got me thinking about the need for an international body that is not necessarily a body per se, but an entity or an enabler that could make it possible in terms of the infrastructure of technology, that would make it possible for governments to be in a point of filtering or controlling what we kind of do. You're right, it's a technology issue. And we need to jump to a point where we can make it possible for people to not be controlled by the governments within their countries to curb what they want to do. So these are some of the things we need to think about and see how we resolve them.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody who hasn't spoken yet? You two, you two are very good and you can come in, but is there anybody who hasn't said anything who'd want? The lady behind you, yes, and you and then the lady behind you. No, whichever order, yes.
Yeah. Okay, I just want to, I'm Eric Hillestad from Norway. There is just one point about this that I want to highlight, and it's about, as you said, a problem of democracy, because I think that the social medias, if they take too much over for journalism, we have some development that might lead to more populism in the world and to reduce the democracy in a way. I see the way that people are talking in all these blogs and commentaries that are anonymous sometimes. They are very rude and very rough and very simplifying of all kinds of problems. And when all kinds of problems are to be solved with like, dislike, it's a simplification that is coming. So it leads to more populism and to politicians who are searching for their votes by likes or dislikes and not by understanding. And I think that it's a really big challenge to keep up the public service journalism with high quality and deep understanding of problems.
The lady behind you, please.
My name is Rose Bell. I am
Could
from
you put it
Uganda.
really close to your mouth? Yeah. Yeah. Loud.
My name is Rose Bell. I am from Uganda. I just wanted to comment on the issue of ICT and democracy, because when you look at the East African region, you have different kind of models. You have Kenya, which is quite open, and Libro, you have different companies coming in and having access to the ICTs. And the democracy, in terms of people participation, is way higher compared to other countries. You have countries like Ethiopia, where the state controls access to ICT, and most of the people have struggled to actually get on the ICT system, and right now it has criminalized using Skype. Then you have a model like Uganda, where you have many telecommunications, and we have 14 million people on mobile. But at the same time, it's not that free, because the people in power are closely linked to the telecommunications. They have shares, some of them. So it is very limiting. Access to ICT itself is not does not mean that you're going to attain democracy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, so we'll take you two now. Sir.
Yeah, I'm trying to respond to the question, where are we headed to? And I think that is a very important question. Regarding ICTs and freedom of speech, we are going towards an exciting time where the only certain thing is uncertainty. And that in itself is not a bad thing, because if we look into the history of the world, there was never a time when humanity was so certain about where we're going, because the moment we become so certain, creativity and innovation will come to a crashing end. I have the confidence, though, that in the universe and in humanity, there is an inbuilt mechanism to be able to cope. So with time, I think we're going to adapt, because I do believe that some of the ICTs that we're quite anxious about will drop off along the way. We'll create a system that will make us be able to cope.
Thank you.
Actually, I think that there will always be a party or somebody who wants to control you. And surveillance and control will always be there. It will come maybe from the governments. It could come from terrorists. It could come from any group, from any person. So the challenge will always be there. And I think what's happening in the world is that the battle is shifting. It is shifting. It's now on the web. And maybe this is part of the evolution after all. I mean, we will see how we will be able, as you said, to cope with that. And what happens is about, I think that the traditional media has failed to a certain extent, because it was also populist. It has become populist. And like in countries like, for example, now in Egypt, we have what some people call the sectarian media. So if the traditional media has failed to create establish its credibility and to attract people and to give authentic news or information, then people will go to these sectarian media, and people will go to populist media. But it's because the failure in the first place came from there. So I think it's challenging for everybody, but it's also, I think it's also about change. It's shifting, it's changing, and the challenge is to know what to do with this change.
Thank you. I'm going to allow, you haven't spoken yet, so I will allow you to speak now. Yeah, and then I'm going to go to Salil and Sarah to reflect on everything that's been said, and then there will still be a little time left for other reactions. Yeah.
So, no, just a question.
Who are you? Sorry.
Sorry, my name is Paula. I'm Swedish. Just a question, comment on that the traditional media has failed, but the question is, how can the traditional media do their job? Who is going to be paying for that? You know, who is going to be paying for investigative journalists who go out and really find out what's going on for 3 or 4 months? Because my understanding, and I don't know how all world parts that you come from look, but my understanding, at least in the US and places like that, is the resources are not there really anymore. People don't have the money to pay for these quote-unquote real journalists to go out there and do their job, and they're very dependent on advertising, and that's the other ethical problem that comes in. You know, if you piss your advertisers off, they might not advertise anymore. So there are so many of these. So how can the traditional media do the real job? Where do we get the real journalists, and who is paying for that?
Yes, thank you very much. I think we've covered most of the issues, but I want to just throw two that we haven't into the room, and then let Salil and Sarah pick up on those and everything else that's been said. We haven't talked about technologies that are designed deliberately to undermine human rights and freedom of speech. Mass surveillance technologies, for example. Let's not forget that there are technologies out there that don't have an upside. And we don't talk about them very often. Sometimes they're military procurement. Sometimes, though, it's your big ICT companies will have a siloed department that deals with this, that isn't even well known across the whole company. And then you have the issue of other technologies that have dual use. So intercept technology, lawful intercept technology, that all mobile phone operators and Ericsson and everybody else will need to put in to their products, is used by good governments for good purposes. So in Sweden, that will be used to track down criminals, pedophiles, etc. But that same technology in another context can be used to track down the human rights activist. It's the same technology. So it's dual use. So we have this worst case scenario of abusive technologies, but then this much wider area of dual use technologies that no one's really picked up on, but I know this is a huge dilemma for the companies. This is what they talk about all the time now, is what do they do on dual use? Salil, Sarah, who wants to go first? Salil, you go. Yeah.
I'll deal with those two first, and then I have some responses to some of the very stimulating things that people have said. The first is about mass surveillance technology, technology with only one purpose. They are a bit like weapons. You have to see them as that. And in the context of this conversation, those which have only one purpose, whose ultimate effect is going to be harming human rights, I can't say they can't be made because somebody will always invent it. There should be huge restrictive controls on their use and sale. For example, supercomputers. When Cray developed the first supercomputer, there were lots of restrictions placed. It was initially used for defense estimations, but then the people figured out that there are huge beneficial advantages for weather prediction and so on. So with a lot of controls, those supercomputers started getting used. So that's one thing to bear in mind. In terms of dual use, of course, the question is about, did the company intend a particular abuse to take place? And most of the companies will probably quite credibly say that, we did develop a system, but its intent was not to get somebody jailed, or its intent was not to get somebody tortured. But once that knowledge is within part of the system, then they have to take corrective steps on their own. Now I say on their own for one reason, because as those of us who are in the bubble of business and human rights know that human rights is not primarily the obligation of the company, it's primarily the obligation of state. And all of this is happening because states are asleep at the wheel. States which have within their jurisdiction companies that can make such technology should impose export controls. Sweden, United States, Canada, Germany, Britain, these countries where a lot of these technologies are made should make sure that it doesn't get into the hands of wrong people. If it means imposing certain constraints on their own business's growth, so be it. If it means imposing sanctions, so be it. That's the way forward. Export control, that's the way out. And that way they can at least ensure that it will perform the legitimate purpose of tracking down the pedophile, but not the human rights defender in Nigeria, for example. So that's one way of looking at it. Very quickly to some of the very stimulating things that were said. On privacy, you mentioned the Rutgers case here earlier today, about this gay student who took his life. Assume there was no internet, and the guy just saw it through the peeping hole, and then went around with a loudspeaker and told everyone that my roommate is gay. The same impact could have happened, and then I want to caution here, because we simply do not know whether it was a film that caused the individual to take the action that he did. Privacy is a difficult thing. You also mentioned about politicians not coming in to become politicians because of concerns about privacy. But that's the trade-off people who want to join politics have to make. One great standard for that is the US law, where there's a case called New York Times versus Sullivan. What it basically says that if you're a public figure and if you're in the public sphere, even if the newspaper has made a statement which is wrong, even if it knows it may be wrong, but if it has taken due diligence to publish is right, then it can go ahead and publish it. All that the newspaper would be guilty of if there was malice. There's a doctrine called absence of malice. And that basically means if the statement is made with reckless disregard of truth, then it's a problem. So politicians who want to step into the public sphere need to know that their lives will be examined very closely. They cannot opt out. There was a British journalist called Bernard Levin, and this is a bit of a joke, but he did say that those who live in glass houses should always undress in dark. So that's one of the ways of looking at it, that privacy is not something that can be taken for granted on this issue. Journalism as a business model, that's something I worry about too, because I really like the profession. I still write often. And one of the things that comes through is that while it is true, of course, that there is a lot of citizen journalism, but the sort of journalism you're talking about that is needed about verifying, and I do wish that your future is true, that people will want to pay. ProPublica is a very good model. But if you take about the conflict in Syria, if a reporter goes out to report there, not only does the reporter need a salary, he or she needs a satellite phone, he needs a backup mechanism, he needs constant online access to verify the claims that are being made by calling the Red Cross. Indeed, are there so many refugees and so on? All of that costs money. In the past, New York Times, Washington Post sent those reporters because Walmart and GE and other companies underwrote that by advertising for it. That model is broken, and some new model has to come in, and that kind of curation indeed has to take place. And I'm not sure exactly if I understood your question about the system in China and the characters, but as I understood it, you said that if you put a particular term in the traditional form, you will get something like error, you cannot go there. But if you change that and use another form in the same language, then you might get the information you're looking for. And all I'm saying is that it's not something terribly new. It was a kind of reality that people lived with in Eastern Europe. And the whole humor-oriented samizdat literature came out, was partly out of that you couldn't say something in a particular way, so you try to say it in a different way. And there are consequences for the state too. I mean, in the Chinese context, during the Iranian Revolution, they decided to ban the term jasmine as a search term, because they didn't want people to search for the Jasmine Revolution. What happened? Jasmine tea exports collapsed.
Sarah.
I want to go back to the point of the United Nations coming up with a committee that is probably going to not monitor, but in a way organize or develop a sort of code of ethics for online or whatever. I think that this is extremely it's a terrible idea because of two reasons. One is that we're going back to centralizing the world, which in a globalization we're facing right now doesn't make any sense. And the other thing, not a lot of people around the world trust the UN in general. So the UN coming up with a committee that is going to tell them we are going to develop your guidelines of practicing your own freedom of expression is completely unacceptable. And regarding the social media or the online media being not being the reason of a revolution, of course, people do not revolt in the street because they don't have Facebook or Twitter. They are revolt in the street because they are hungry, they don't have access to medicine and education and so on. But it's an extremely strong tool to mobilize the people, to make them see in countries where national media, either TV or newspapers, will not write about any of these things. This social media is their only tool to let people see what's really going on. So mobilizing the people is the spark of social media in countries that cannot practice democracy and the freedom of expression in their national media. And regarding the future of newspapers, I think the youth of today are the future of tomorrow. So the youth of today, they do not read newspapers. And if they do, they see it through a link that's on a tweet of their friends that guides them to a link of the online page of the newspaper, not the written and printed newspaper. So, and if me as a youth is exposed to this type of environment, then definitely when I grow up, I will think about developing that part, not developing the written, printed newspaper. Yeah, and that's it. I just also, one point about social media is that now social media is not only a source of information, but there are also new theories and science about social media being a new way of marketing. Either marketing for the newspapers or marketing for certain initiatives or whatever. So social media marketing is also another form of freedom of expression other than just being a source of information.
Thank you. So we have a couple of two-handers, and if there's anybody else with 2 or 3 hands to put in the air, they can come in, and then we need to close. So, let's start there. Yeah.
I would like to respond because I think you criticized
what I was saying, so I'd like to respond to that. Oh, no, no, no. What I was saying, I said. I was, in no way can you disrespect me, sir. You don't know me. I think that the point about the megaphone is interesting, yet again fundamentally untrue. If a person says something by megaphone, he cannot be anonymous. He is the person saying it. Everybody is seeing him saying it. And I think this is related to your point, that you do not know who you are fighting. There are people spreading information about you and you do not know who they are. So this information is only reflecting on me, it's not reflecting on them. And I think that's difficult. Also the thing about the politicians, I actually think that it is wrong to say that this is a trade-off the politicians have to make. It is a trade-off the politicians now have to make because of how we conceive of journalism and how we conceive of newspapers. I actually think that unless a politician is a Christian who is putting some very strong opinions out there about family values, it is not in the interest of the general public what he is doing in his bedroom. It is simply none of our business.
Okay, politicians and bedrooms is always a bad place to end. So let's get us away from politicians and bedrooms. Salil wants to reply. Do we give him the right to reply?
Yes,
yeah, well, you speak first.
Yeah, because you comment, I will just comment what you said about politicians that don't have the courage to become politicians because the privacy will be disclosed. And you said that you should, as a politician, accept that you have to disclose and you will be disclosed. You said that you need to undress in a glass house, so in the darkness, whatever. But I don't think what undressing has to do with me being a politician. I want to be a politician, not to undress. And that's what media need to understand. I have a dream and I have a vision. The rest is my privacy.
Right, Salil, quickly.
Very, very quickly. It need not be a megaphone. It could be a scandal sheet I write, photocopy and put it under everyone's door. That's one thing. Two, in this particular case of Rutgers University you're talking about, it wasn't anonymous. It was on YouTube. Everyone knew who posted it. So that's one thing. And turning to the we'll talk more later, but turning to the politicians part of it and secrecy, it's not a question about family values and not family values. If the person is having, let's say, a relationship with someone to which he doesn't have a legal relationship, that person could be a business person, that person could be corrupt, that person could be a spy from another country. That has a whole lot of implications, but people do have a right to know about what politicians are doing in their private lives.
Okay, we'll just take two last interventions, you and then Pim, and then I'll just say something and we'll close. Yeah.
Okay, this is a bit related to what you were saying about hostility of the internet and also about the anonymity and what to do. I think the problem is that, I mean, web is at the moment in the hands of those who don't get a voice in the national media, mass media. So, for example, in the Arab Spring, it worked for those who wanted democracy but don't get a voice. In the Nordic countries, it's in the hands of populists because they don't get to be in the national media or in the popular media. So, I mean, it is actually more of a problem who is present there. And I think it's also in Finland, like, for example, if politicians are complaining about this, like internet, that web is so hostile, but why are not they there then changing the discourse of it? Because it's happening in any case. I mean, I think there's a great comparison that horse cart drivers went into strike in Finland in 1922 because they refused to drive trucks, and this strike is still on. So I think it is a bit same with the politicians. We should define, I think, what are the most fundamental values of our societies and democracies, and we should think what are the tools to promote those values in the age of internet, in the age of technology. I think we have to find ways for that.
Very well said.
And you actually said sort of what I wanted to say there, but because we can discuss forever the pros and cons of new technology. It's here, as you say. And some questions I leave this conversation with is the one of the business model for qualitative, reliable information in the future. I mean, there's loads of information, fine, but what are the business models so people can live off of creating qualitative research? No one's really answered that question here, and no wonder. We don't know what that will be, that form. The other one is what technologies hard technologies will truly decentralize information. And yeah, those are two questions I leave this conversation with, and that's good. I mean, they're there to solve.
I think they're good questions. And I suppose we are all in agreement. What do we agree on? We agree that technology is going to have a fundamental impact on how human rights, freedom of expression, but also democracy itself goes forward. But then we have different trends, and we're all talking about different... So some of us are optimistic. We talk about direct democracy, access to technology, allowing more of the 6 billion or the 9 billion to participate. Others of you are more concerned about the crudification of information and opinion that takes place on the internet, and the lack of quality and the lack of a business model for quality information. And then another discord, I suppose, is the privacy one. It came up yesterday, it came up again. Some of you are really worried about privacy and the use of data online. And our colleague who's not here at the moment, but saying that in good times we surrender our data, but in bad times we might regret that we did. Some of you are less worried about that. Some of you, I think in the spirit of yesterday, even see privacy as something that we're moving away from. This idea that personal privacy is as sacrosanct as it has been in recent times. There's a lot more. I think there was a really good discussion. I'd like to thank you all, and can you just clap yourselves? Thank you.